There's tremendous unity in the Republican Party. This is an outstanding group of people. I'm with them 1,000%. They're with me 1,000%. We agree just about on everything, and if there isn't, we work it out. We have one thing in mind, and that's making our country great.
Former President Donald Trump is on Capitol Hill today to visit with congressional Republicans. It's the first time he's been in Washington since he left office, and since his supporters stormed the Capitol on January 6th in 2021. The high-stakes meetings between Trump and both Senate and GOP House members took place near the Capitol just as the final months of the 2024 campaign grow more contentious. House Republicans are big supporters of Trump, while a number of Senate Republicans often maintain a more distant relationship with the former president, some even skipping the meeting altogether, citing scheduling conflicts. Joining us now is the Hill's Mychael Schnell. Mychael, thanks for being on. Lots to unpack with Trump in Washington. What was his main message to congressional Republicans?
Yeah, hey, Margaret, good afternoon. Exactly right. Former President Trump up here on Capitol Hill today, not in the Capitol, but nearby the Capitol at Capitol Hill Club and the headquarters for the National Republican Senatorial Campaign. And essentially what his message was he was talking a lot about how he thinks that Republicans are going to bode well come November, both, in the down ballot races and in the presidential race, talking about his different policy perspectives, stuff, things like abortion, immigration, the border, tariffs, the economy, and essentially sort of giving a veiled suggestion that Republicans should tamp down on the infighting. He urged Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene to be nice to Speaker Mike Johnson. Remember, it was just last month when Marjorie Taylor Greene moved to force a vote on ousting Speaker Johnson. That effort very short-lived and was quickly quashed by a number of Democrats and Republicans, but nonetheless putting a spotlight on that infighting for President Trump, saying, bring down the heat. Not officially saying that, but suggesting that they should bring down the heat.
So, Mychael, definitely a unifying message from Trump. But what are Republicans hoping to achieve here by welcoming him to the Hill?
Yeah, so a few things, Margaret. First off is GOP unity. There's been a lot of disunity in the past year and a half of this Congress when you talk about just House Republicans specifically. Of course, we saw that protracted speaker's race last January at the beginning of the Congress. And then we saw the ouster of Speaker Kevin McCarthy, another example of disunity among Republicans. And then there was that 3-week fight about McCarthy's successor, ultimately landing with Mike Johnson, but not after some bitter infighting and Republicans having to cycle through 3 other candidates. So Trump coming to Washington, meeting with House Republicans, meeting with Senate Republicans, sort of gives this image that Republicans are unified behind the former president as we get closer to November, just about 5 months away now. The other thing is planning for what could happen if Republicans get what's called a trifecta here in Washington. That's control of the White House, control of the Senate, and control of the House. Republican leaders already talking about what they would do with that power, doing things like extending the Trump tax cuts, talking about immigration, the border, the economy, going after the Department of Justice. Republicans have said that the DOJ is weaponized. So the other part of this trip was to sort of game plan what Republicans could get done if they control all levers of power in Washington come next year.
Now, the top Republican in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, who is certainly no friend of Trump's, but has thrown his support behind him, was among the lawmakers meeting with the former president. Trump and McConnell have really been having an icy relationship for a number of years. From what you've heard from your reporting, were the two actually speaking behind closed doors today?
Yeah, this was the first time that Trump and McConnell, I believe we were in the same room since, their very public falling out following the January 6th 2021 attack on the Capitol. And now my colleague Alex Bolton at The Hill said that he spoke to McConnell following this meeting, who called the meeting between Trump and Senate Republicans, quote, positive, and McConnell also shaking hands with Trump. So sort of a really, important moment there. And look, the relationship is absolutely icy between McConnell and Trump, but they've sort of been trying to mend fences in a way. McConnell endorsing Trump for president a few months back. It was just sort of statements. It wasn't a big endorsement event, and the two hadn't appeared together on the campaign trail, but nonetheless, sort of the beginning of the repair of that relationship. And we are told that they spoke today, calling it positive, that shaking of hands. So a really significant moment right there when you talk about unity within the Republican Party in the lead up to November.
That's quite a statement there. Can you talk about the reception and reaction to Trump from Republicans? What are you hearing from your sources about the mood inside?
Yeah, I spoke to Congressman Matt Gaetz when he emerged from that meeting between Trump and House Republicans, and the way he described it was a pep rally. He said that Trump was very enthusiastic, very excited to talk to House Republicans. He was received extremely well among GOP lawmakers who were excited to hear what they had to say. The meeting, I'm told, started out by House Republicans singing Trump happy birthday. It's his birthday tomorrow, June 14th. And Congressman Roger Williams then presented a game bat and a game ball from last night's congressional baseball game to Trump. Republicans winning. I believe the score was 31-11, a really overwhelming win last night at Nationals Park. And then Trump getting that game ball and game bat. So it was sort of a friendly, a very cordial meeting, one that we are told, there was applause at a number of moments that, again, Trump was very well received, but some policy talk, but also some of those more lighthearted moments.
Lots of specifics there on those meetings. Now, happening on the Hill as well, a group of conservative Republicans led by Senator J.D. Vance are working to block the confirmation of dozens of Biden's federal government nominees. What positions are impacted here, and why is Vance trying to jam up these nominees to begin with?
Yeah, essentially what this is Vance is leading a group of Senate conservatives who are signing onto a pledge to block the fast tracking of some of Biden's judicial nominees and nominees for the U.S. Attorney's Office. And what he says is, quote, in response to the current administration's persecution of former President Trump. So those who have signed this pledge that they will not help fast track nominees who have, quote, suggested the Trump prosecutions were reasonable or endorsed President Trump's guilt in these sham proceedings. Of course, right there referring to Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg and his prosecution of Trump on 34 counts of falsifying business records in the New York hush money case. So some positions that this could already affect. There are nominees. Sarah French Russell is one of them. She has been nominated to serve as district judge for the District of Connecticut. Another individual, Mustafa Katsubai, who was nominated to serve as judge for the District of Oregon. And then also Amir Ali and Sparkle Sunan, who are both nominated to become district judges for the District of Columbia. So it'll be very interesting to see how this pans out, what the reaction is from more rank and file Republicans, and of course from Democrats, but nonetheless, J.D. Vance leading that effort up here on Capitol Hill.
From Capitol Hill, the Hill's Mychael Schnell. Thanks for being on.
Thanks, Margaret.
A major decision out this morning from the Supreme Court dealing with the abortion drug Mifepristone. The justices found unanimously that the group seeking to pull the drug off the market lacked standing and did not have the right to bring the case to court. Now the commonly used abortion drug will remain widely available. As the first major Supreme Court case on reproductive rights since overturning Roe v. Wade, the ruling is a significant setback for the anti-abortion movement. Joining us now to talk about this story and more, the Hill's White House correspondent, Alex Gangitano. Alex, now, is this decision surprising since it is really the first abortion case since Dobbs, which we know overturned Roe v. Wade?
That's right. This is the first national abortion case, and something that would have been had a huge impact on women across the country if the Supreme Court were to restrict access to the to abortion medication. I don't think it's surprising that the Supreme Court was able to preserve access. I do think that the unanimous decision is surprising, considering it's a conservative leaning court. But they leaned on the fact that the science shows that this drug is safe. It's also an issue that Republicans are kind of split on. Some Republicans have said that this needs to be the next thing that they target and that it's not safe and the FDA needs to take away approval of it. Meanwhile, former President Trump has kind of not come out with his hard and fast decision on it. He said in a recent Time magazine article that he has an opinion on it. He's going to explain it at a later date. And I actually heard from the Trump campaign today. They told me that after this unanimous decision, the matter is settled and the election is now just focused on taking down Biden. So I think they're ready to leave this in the Supreme Court's hands and not, promise to overturn this if Trump's reelected, because it is a controversial issue.
Alex, you laid out that lawmakers are certainly weighing in, all closely watching every move of the court when it comes to reproductive rights. Take a listen to Majority Leader Chuck Schumer on the Senate floor earlier.
Though I am relieved by today's decision made by the court, no one should be celebrating this decision. This decision should have been an obvious one. And let us not forget, This decision was based not on the merits, but on a lack of standing. We are not yet out of the woods.
So are Democrats concerned about future legal challenges here? And on the other side, what is the main takeaway from the right?
Yeah, so in terms of what Democrats have been telling me and what the Biden campaign said after this was basically that what Schumer said, that they're not out of the woods. After the Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe v. Wade 2 years ago, they have been 21 states that have enacted what Democrats deem to be extreme abortion laws. And that's just a step too far. So yes, the abortion medication was protected here, but if Republicans are reelected and take over Congress and Trump's elected, this is going to maybe be something that's could be overturned or challenged at that point. So Democrats are definitely warning against celebrating this at this point. Republicans, as I mentioned, have had a mixed response. Trump, his campaign has said that this is a settled argument at this point, and the Supreme Court spoke. Meanwhile, some lawmakers I've seen have been saying that this is the wrong approach. It does not protect life in the way that they want to see it. And so I do think there'll be challenges, or there'll be some, vows from Republican lawmakers to take on abortion medication if they get control in November.
House voted to hold Attorney General Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress for refusing to turn over subpoenaed audio recordings of President Biden. Now, Republicans argue the recordings are crucial to their impeachment inquiry into Biden. Where is that impeachment effort going at this point, and what is the next step after the contempt vote?
Yeah, that's the big question. So the impeachment inquiry has been kind of quiet in recent months. The investigation failed to produce evidence of any criminal wrongdoing against Biden and his family. And so the inquiry actually appears to have died down. But we actually heard just this week, there was a recent criminal referrals that have elevated the situation. So basically, GOP leaders that have been behind this impeachment inquiry have asked the Justice Department to bring criminal charges against the president's son, Hunter Biden, who, of course, was convicted on federal gun charges earlier this week, and Biden's brother, James, accusing them of lying to lawmakers during their conversation with investigators about impeachment. So this kind of have brought impeachment into light again. And then, as you mentioned, Merrick Garland being held in contempt because of his refusal to turn over the subpoenaed audio. And this was the audio of Biden's interview with special counsel Robert Hur, when Hur came out with his report and said that Biden was a elderly man with memory problems. That's something that I think Republicans want the audio of to explore further how he felt about Biden's age and memory. But they also, I think, want they have the transcript of the conversation, but they think the audio could show some other revelations here. While meanwhile, on the other side, the president and his team have said that there's no relevant information inside of this audio beyond, and that the transcript says it all. So there's no need to see it.
Alex, right now, President Biden and world leaders are rallying around Ukraine at a high-stakes G7 summit in Italy. What is expected to come out of this summit?
Yeah, so right now they're over in Italy. The president's actually due to meet with Zelensky. We've seen Zelensky with the president of Ukraine, with other leaders throughout the day so far in Italy. They're really showing this message of unity with the European allies to support Zelensky. So many of these international engagements, we saw Biden actually with President Zelensky just last week in France. So there's been a lot of conversations face to face with the two of them recently. And so many of these conversations are just based around the fact that the president wants to make it very clear that the U.S. stands behind Ukraine and that the U.S. will work with allies to do whatever they can to preserve democracy amid Russia's invasion. That also comes as here at home, we're seeing support for more aid to Ukraine dwindle. People are questioning, why more taxpayer dollars are going to Ukraine. So it's definitely a debate. And Biden, I think, is not ready to slow down on sanctions against Russia. There's also conversations about freezing assets that were taken from Russia and making it it as part of a loan for Ukraine. Those are some deliverables that we're hearing will come out of the summit. And yeah, it's all part of the president's overall strategy to show that he is the leader among allies on supporting Ukraine.
Alex, on Capitol Hill, Democratic lawmakers are trying to protect access to IVF by enshrining the right to the procedure. Democrats are continually trying to push Republicans to be voting on this reproductive rights as the 2024 election heats up. How is the vote expected to shake out?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's votes on, there's IVF bills kind of on both sides going on right now, and a lot of them are messaging bills. I think that both sides want to use IVF in the way that they think voters will respond most closely to come November. So we actually saw Senate Democrats this week block a Republican effort to pass protections for individuals seeking IVF, basically under the argument that the Republican bill doesn't go nearly as far enough, and that Democratic bills to protect IVF access go as far as they need to go. So there's, this back and forth conversation. And again, it really comes down to messaging that on the campaign trail, Republicans are trying to fight back against the narrative that IVF is in peril here and something that not every American woman will have access to one day, and that they actually want to support IVF. The Republicans who think that that's a good strategy. Meanwhile, Democrats really want to paint Republicans as the party that wants to restrict IVF, and they're going to, do whatever they can to preserve it, but also to block a bill like we saw this week, just to show that, Republicans aren't doing enough to preserve IVF.
One of the largest unions in the nation has yet to formally endorse either Biden or Trump for 2024. When are we expecting the Teamsters to actually make a decision? How is withholding their backing impacting both campaigns?
Yeah, this is a big issue for the Biden campaign in particular, because the Biden campaign has, touted themselves as the campaign for unions and for labor leaders. They saw unions line up very early supporting them, these major unions, including the AFL-CIO and other big entities, quickly saying, I support you. The United Auto Workers was one holdout that they ended up supporting Biden, especially after we saw Biden picket with them in Michigan last year. So these are, the Biden campaign and Democrats have really come out to expect that unions will rally behind them. And then the Teamsters here are withholding their, coveted endorsement. So that's actually a win for Trump, that they're taking longer to decide who they want to endorse. And I think it speaks to the overall narrative that a lot of, battleground states, blue collar workers, people, in these critical swing states are leaning towards, according to polling, Trump's campaign during this election. And it's a real threat to Biden when his polling numbers in these battleground states like Michigan, with a lot of union workers, is really struggling in those areas. So I think the Teamsters are keeping them on their toes here, but also want to appeal to the members of their union. And if the members, are leaning towards Trump, they're not just going to endorse Biden here. So I think we're going to see both campaigns really try to fight for this endorsement, because it's definitely a critical one.
The Hill's Alex Gangitano, great to have you.
Thank you.
Wall Street journalist Evan Gershkovich is set to stand trial in Russia. Gershkovich has been held in Russia for over a year on espionage charges. He's accused of gathering secret information about a Russian military facility on orders from the CIA. Officials have not yet provided evidence for any of those charges. Gershkovich faces up to 20 years in prison if convicted. The Biden administration is working to negotiate his release, but the Russian Foreign Ministry says it would consider a prisoner swap only after a verdict. Gershkovich is one of at least a dozen Americans being held in Russia. Senate Republicans have blocked a bill requiring the Supreme Court to adopt a code of conduct. The push to implement a code of conduct for the High Court comes after several high-profile controversies. Those include justices accepting gifts and hospitality from political mega donors, alleged conflicts of interest, controversial flags flying outside of Justice Alito's home, and comments made by Justice Alito and his wife in a secret recording. While the bill was held up in the Judiciary Committee, it would require justices to not only implement an ethics code, but it would also require them to create a mechanism to investigate and enforce violations. Ranking member Senator Lindsey Graham called the bill an overreach and warned it would undermine the court's ability to operate independently. Fulton County prosecutors want Georgia Appeals Court to toss out former President Trump's appeal in his election interference case. That is the appeal of the state's ruling that allows District Attorney Fani Willis to continue to work on the trial. Willis faced scrutiny for a conflict of interest over her romantic involvement with former Fulton County prosecutor Nathan Wade. Prosecutors urged the court to dismiss the appeal due to the lack of sufficient evidence. Wade spoke to CNN and said he expects Trump's case to go forward as expected, even if the former president is reelected in November. The Biden administration's latest attempt to close the so-called gun show loophole has been blocked in 4 states. The ATF implemented a rule late last month that would require a background check before purchasing a firearm at a gun show. Shortly after it went into effect, a judge ruled it could not be enforced in Texas. This week, a federal judge expanded that ruling to Louisiana, Utah, and Mississippi. The decision also blocks the enforcement of the rule for a number of gun rights organizations. The rule remains in effect for the rest of the country while legal challenges play out. Elon Musk says that Tesla shareholders are on track to greenlight a major pay package. The billionaire announced the news on his social media platform X after the almost $56 billion package was struck down by a Delaware judge earlier this year. The plan would grant Musk performance-based stock options, but even if investors back the measure, the court will have the last say. Tesla shareholders had previously sued over the massive package, arguing it was approved because Musk effectively controlled the board. The news comes as Musk is being sued for harassment by former SpaceX employees. That's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Margaret Chadbourn. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel. And come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.